Hey, all right. Welcome back, everybody. Just needed to use my PhD to turn on a microphone. So this is the only time I get called doctor. Like, way to go, doctor. Welcome back. I hope everyone is super caffeinated and are just raring to ask questions, because I always feel like the best panel is when I don't ask a lot of questions. I want you guys to get the most out of this. So please raise your hand. Don't be shy. So, but before we get started, I think we should start with some introductions, and I'll just start immediately to my left.
Perfect. Hi, everybody. Naheed Kurji, co-founder, president, and CEO of Cyclica, a Toronto-based global biotech company at the intersection of AI for chemistry and biology. And on behalf of Cyclica, co-founded the Alliance for Artificial Intelligence in Healthcare, the AAIH, which now comprises about 55 organizations globally, big pharma, hyper-innovative biotech, tech bio companies, academic institutions, including Tulane University, and also a appointed member of the federal Canadian government on the Life Science Advisory Board. Thank you.
Great.
All right.
Lindsey.
Hi, I'm Lindsey Jardine. I work for Boston Scientific. I am clinical research project manager. I traditionally work with mostly startups. So I take startups from post concept all the way through to bring them to market and then get acquired or go IPO. So
Great.
I am Andrew Latham. I'm an executive director in Merck's business development and licensing group. I've been with Merck for 15 years. The first 10 was in the labs doing research and development. The last 5 years has been in business development. So I'm part of search and evaluation. About half of our pipeline comes from the outside world. So I go out there along with the other team members to find opportunities. Those could be therapeutics or technologies, and hopefully put together licensing deals.
So this is the group you're going to want to pick their brains for. So I definitely want to see some questions from you guys. Okay, starting off, I'm going to ask this question of Andrew and Lindsey. How do you guys find your next thing?
Yes, that's I'll take that first.
You're really excited. Let's get at it. Yeah.
So that is a really good question. So how do we go out there and find the next biggest thing that hopefully turns into some type of deal? I would say the biggest opportunities and the places that we find are with JP Morgan Healthcare Conference. We go to that meeting, and Bio International. So those are our big meetings for the year, where we connect with our internal stakeholders and our internal scientists. We find out what is on their minds, what are their interests, and what do we have an active need for. We then go to those partnering meetings and schedule meetings with academics as well as startups and biotechs to learn about their opportunities and find out if it fills a gap. So those are our biggest opportunities throughout the year. We also go to smaller partnering meetings that are more focused on specifically what we cover within the search and evaluation team. I will also, you can also submit just your idea through the Merck website. So if you go to merck.com/licensing, you can submit anything that you have, and that comes to the business development team as well. So those are our biggest ways to do it. We also work very closely with our competitive intelligence group internally. So if our therapeutic or functional areas, if they have needs, I can collaborate with competitive intelligence. We do worldwide landscape reviews to identify companies, and then it could just be me reaching out to your business development contact or through the tech transfer office.
Great.
question.
Yeah, actually, I have a question.
All right.
How often do you mine NIH for technology?
Yikes. We do. It does come up. I can't think of any specific examples. Our scientists are also heavily involved with looking at new opportunities, and they feed those opportunities into the business development team as well. So I know at different conferences, scientific meetings, our lead scientists and therapeutic and functional area leadership finds opportunities, including at NIH, and that kind of prompts the business development team to reach out.
I have a quick question. On an annual basis, how many applications or submissions do you get through the website, and what percentage of those would you say are actually compelling?
Good question. Specifically through the website, we get hundreds, if not thousands, through the website. A very small percentage actually turns out to be something useful. I would say the most exciting opportunities come from partnering meetings, those being JP Morgan, Bio. I was at Bio Europe last week. Those are our big meetings. I would say the website is not the most useful. Trying to find a BD contact at a major partnering meeting is the most useful.
Yeah. So I primarily work with startups, and I've worked with quite a few startups at this point. So my perspective is a bit different, just because you're coming from Merck, huge company. I now work at Boston Scientific, but for trying to find the next big thing, which is like the new billion-dollar question, especially when in startup space, I tend to go to a lot of large conferences, not necessarily JP Morgan, the ones that you've been to. That's a really good idea though. But trying to find the niche that needs to be filled and the uniqueness in how you need to fill it. So the startup that I'm currently working with right now, it was a technology that's already existed, and everyone just thought it was the most ridiculous idea to put in the heart. And they tried and tried and tried. And it wasn't until we got after or post preclinical where pigs were like jumping off the table, and we're just like, I think this is going to work, guys.
Literally pigs jumping off the
Literally
table.
pigs jumping off the table. And so just for me, looking for the next big startup is looking at those posters, about like thinking critically, evaluating really what it is that you're trying to do, how innovatively the company is doing it, the team that is trying to bring it there. So if it's somebody who's finishing a project in their PhD and brings on a business partner, CEO, or it somehow acquires a strategic investor, really looking for those kinds of companies and getting involved through lots of networking, lots of understanding what they're trying to do, how it is they're trying to do it, and really kind of getting involved with the leadership team, because you can have a brilliant idea where pigs are jumping off the table, and not that that's the only brilliant way to do things, but if you don't have a good leadership team, it's never going to work. So really trying to do your background information, your background searches on who's all doing everything, how effective they are at leading, and also the technology.
Great.
So I can add one more thing. If you're an academic and you need to get in touch with a company like Merck, work through your tech transfer office. I mean, I know James and Patrick, they have my cell phone numbers and could easily get in touch with me. And that's a really good way to make a contact that is the most useful. The website is helpful, but it's best if you can make a contact that works better. And I do want to explore ways to mine NIH. Well, let's connect after this.
So I'm going to ask you, Naheed, about what is your ideal collaborator?
That's a good question. So we define collaboration and partnership differently.
Okay.
A collaboration for us, so very quickly, we're a biotech company. We refer to ourselves as a neo-biotech company, changing the paradigm of how drugs are discovered, bringing together the term artificial intelligence, but I cringe my teeth when I say that. The newest, best technologies to advance a portfolio of assets. So for us, collaboration is defined as when we would work with a pharma company who have a problem or an opportunity that they're looking to solve, and they would engage with us under a standard structure of an upfront fee and milestone payments as things progress. That's a collaboration. And that for us is defined as how we work with pharma. A partnership, which is at the tail end of a drug discovery program when we want to partner that off to somebody to take it into clinical trials and develop. I think that's how we define partnership, and the archetype of the two is very different. So when we're looking for a collaborator, which we don't do too often, we collaborate with pharma companies because at the end of the day, in our business, they're also the ones buying the assets because they have the development infrastructure. So for them, we don't really care so much about the economics. We care, is this project going to give you confidence that our team have a platform that can solve a problem so that you can then take that trust and apply it to our portfolio? and then come on the other end and create a marketplace with us. So it has to be strategic on then the partnership side. And then we have a model at Cyclica, not unlike venture capital firms do, is you talk about people, you talk about technology, you talk about vision. We have what we call the quality framework, and we'll put a bunch of ones and zeros into this model. And the first thing that it's a trigger for the rest is, do we like them? Do we trust them? Do we think that they're going to treat us with respect? If one, then the rest of the stuff makes sense. We'll calculate out. If no, it doesn't matter how big the economic opportunity is. If we don't want to do business with them, if we don't think they're going to treat us with respect, we just won't do it. We'll move on to the next deal.
Okay, so thinking about how you guys each work with academia, if you could push a magic button to make the most ideal collaboration, partnership, research endeavor, what would that look like? Who wants to answer that first? Anybody?
I'll take this one. Considering mostly clinical and strategy, or clinical strategy and regulatory strategy, the biggest hurdles that I find in my job are actually collaborating with major institutions. So it's not necessarily the physicians or the clinical research staff that is the difficult part. It's actually working with the business and with the finances of each institution. So I could have a physician that says, like, I have 40 patients, which already meets our cap for enrollment. But it'll take years to get anything through a financial negotiation or a contract negotiation. So if I could push a magic button, I would make sure Janet in accounting has my freaking phone number and is able to answer and be able to push all of these great ideas through, so we can get those enrollments, so we can make sure that FDA submission gets there on time, because it is very, very, very painful, not only for us, the sponsor, but also for the patients, the physicians, all these people that are involved and so want to be involved in clinical research, that it's really an institutional issue that I keep running into, it's part of the startup is just getting anything through any kind of institution or major institution, which is I know a lot of institutions are really working on that. So that would be my magic button.
I'll add a bit to that, and I'll tie your first question with this question. So in the audience someplace, and I think you actually just stood up. Sorry to put the spotlight on you, is Maurice Shen, Cyclica senior.
Come on down.
That was definitely not planned. Maurice is Cyclica senior manager of academic partnerships. So within Cyclica, and one of our entire models is to hunt to find good biological research that we can then translate into a viable drug discovery program and move that at pace to certain inflection points. And so for us, then coming back to your question on partnership, we have a dedicated academic partnership program where I think have probably worked with, or at least engaged with, close to a couple hundred academic institutions globally. And there we've learned a lot on what makes a good partner. And then also if we had a magic wand or could snap our finger and say, how can we make that better? What we've learned and has helped us optimize is what kind of partner we don't want to work with.
Sometimes a place to start.
We have over 82 programs at various stages of drug discovery in our portfolio right now that are active, some at preclinical and IND enabling studies, some at hit generation, hit identification, and beyond. We have another 50 that are waiting for data from academic partners, some of which have been waiting for biophysical or functional data for 12 to 18 months. And it's really hard sometimes because the motivation of an academic PI oftentimes is not the same motivation as a company that wants to move fast. So if we had a magic wand, I would say, that's where our quality framework comes in. Do we believe that that's a group that would work well with us and move at the pace generally? The second one is tech transfer. And we spoke about that, over the past couple of days. It's not all the same. Some tech transfer offices are very creative and open-minded and collaborative, and they want to figure out a way to move things forward. And others are very aggressively possessive. And their attitude is, well, you're lucky to be working with us. And it's not open-minded in terms of let's come to the table and have a meaningful conversation. So if I could snap a finger, it would be a standardized way of tech transfer where they are incentivized to do business with us as much as we are engaged and interested to do business with them. I think we would do much more for humanity if there is a much more open-minded and creative standardized way of doing business with tech transfer.
And I tried to get him to name names, but he wouldn't. So
And that was after a couple balls of wine, and I still did not name names.
still after wine, nothing. Andrew, what about
Yeah.
you?
More of a comment. Could the motivator here be that you guys aren't just going to do, I mean, because I hear this a lot, okay, and I try not to take it personally because I am part of tech transfer, right? So, and I work for the government, which is another wrinkle in the thing. But to your point, yeah, I mean, the field needs to be more creative and innovative in terms of the way it's been doing business. It's a model that's been in existence for 30 something years now, right? So instead of saying I want blanket, is the incentive perhaps to collaborate with people who consistently are collaborators, are give and take. And, I'm sorry, you other people that don't know how to do that, you're going to get left behind. Maybe that's the motivation, and for you guys to sit out there and go out there and sing the praises of the organizations that are doing it right. We all want to mimic that, right? And so I encourage you to use your bully pulpit as industry to point out what is wrong with the field so that is the motivation in the change.
Can I give you a round of applause here?
Because that
I would love that.
Thank you, Lily.
So round of applause. Absolutely. I think that there's a push and a pull strategy. What you just suggested is going to take time. It's going to how do you affect behavioral change or industry change? And that to me could work over time if industry rallied and started championing good ways of doing business. The good science that we see on a day-to-day basis that is just dying on a vine that's waiting to be worked on, and people sit back and twiddle their thumbs. I want to push on that. I don't want to just pull and just wait for these folks to say, oh, that's a model that that's going to take 10, 15, 20 years. And so is there another way that we can kind of meet in the middle? And that's at least what Maurice, our partnership team, we try and think about this differently. And it doesn't have to be one size fits all. There is nuance that's going to apply to academic institutions globally. But is there a way that people can converge on an ideology that says, okay, that's a really interesting way, and not do it case by case? I can tell you one example where it took us 2.5 years to spin out a company from an academic institution in Canada where we were putting money into it. It was all teed up and set up. And they just, we're too busy right now. We're too busy. And now that company is a pride of joy of Canada biotech. But 2.5 years, I don't know. I think it's just long in the tail, just hoping that the industry is able to pull it along.
So, just real quick follow-up. In your opinion or experience, what percentage of the industry is the bad side? Is it 20% of the industry or is it 80% of the industry?
What are you defining as the industry?
The tech transfer.
Tech transfer.
The university tech transfer ecosystem. Is it 20% that doesn't want to play nice in the sandbox, or is it 80% that doesn't want to play nice in the sandbox? And are you focusing on trying to get the 20% that doesn't want to play, or are you focusing on the 80% that is giving you what you need and that will stick with them?
Can I give that a quick stab? Okay, so Maurice, what would you say? About 60% not so easy, 40% good?
I would flip that. I mean,
40-60, so 50-50. That's just
Well, then we have a problem.
that's a good negotiation between my 50-50.
I will say there are institutions I will never work with again.
Yeah.
And that's not a good statistic necessarily for you, but there's groups that I gravitate towards because I have a good relationship and I'll go to them first. But I'd like to think that the market works its way out, Lily, but I don't know if that's always true, that eventually the good people will succeed and then the bad people won't, but sometimes.
I mean, when their faculty are saying, why can't we get things done? Then that's when there's big change, right? And so anyways, just
Right.
Just a
this for Naheed. Can you give me some concrete example of what you mean by disrespectful behavior towards your company? That gives a zero.
And I don't even need to give a bottle of wine for you to
No.
describe that.
This is the third.
Disrespectful, what are disrespectful for our recording, because before Ian kills me, disrespectful behavior towards.
Oh, the list is very long. One concrete example was November 2021. We were on a call with senior leadership from a prominent academic institution. And we have a good relationship with them. And the individual from the tech transfer office, who I've known for quite some time, who was sitting there and he said, we have a number of programs that we'd be interested to come to Cyclica and partnering with you all. And we talked about structure and all this kind of stuff. And then he came back and said, we talked about IP sharing. And our model is generally, we will go into any engagement and just cut it straight down the middle, 50-50 IP. We'll put in money, we'll put in our team, we'll carry the ball forward. Some situations, maybe we should be taking less, maybe some, but it shakes out pretty evenly, and that's our model, and it's worked for us. And this individual came back and said, you guys aren't Pfizer. Like, who do you think you are, Pfizer? And I just had to sit back. I'm like, and here's my response. Sat back, I said, you know what, sir, you're right. We're not Pfizer, not Novartis, we're not Merck. We are Cyclica. We're sitting across from you and we're saying, this is what we can do, and here's our success, and we want to do business with you. When's the last time Pfizer came and did a deal with your institution? When's the last time a big pharma came and did a deal with your institution? Big goose egg. So why are you giving me flack about what's your best alternative to not this? Letting that science just die on a vine, or hope? And so that's the level of disrespect that we have seen. And that's probably the nicest thing that's happened. And it just, AI and drug discovery, or like every other company, it's not about the solution that is being used, it's about the problem that is being solved. And let's talk about that in a more meaningful way, instead of creating these categories and buckets and saying, oh, because you use these two letters, that you must be just a, sizzle, not steak, not fundamental science. And so I think it cuts a bunch of ways. It's not about Cyclica. I want to answer your question. We can talk about that a little bit more offline.
And I've had challenges there too. You think, okay, they potentially would jump and say, great, we'll work with Merck. The last time I had a sponsored research agreement, which really had no IP implications, it sat there for over a year with no red line after repeated attempts. And then the budget was gone and we had to terminate. And that was with a major institution.
I'm going to flip the question around and say, what do you think you guys can do better, industry?
Yeah, so where I have seen it and where we could potentially make improvements is with providing advice and feedback earlier in the relationships. And I feel that if we just had non-confidential, very informal chats early on where we said yay or nay to opportunities, this is of interest, this isn't of interest, why don't you generate these couple key data sets? That would be really helpful for steering technology and opportunities in the right direction and set it up much better in the future for partnering. So a while ago, James came to me with one of his PIs had a question. He wanted to propose this whole research collaboration. He just called me, asked me a question. I said, I'll chat with our infectious disease vaccines people. Asked them the idea. They came back with an answer. So I was able to call the PI and say, you have a fantastic idea. Clay, you were there too. You have a great idea. Unfortunately, Merck already did that experiment and it failed. So we saved him a bunch of time and resources just by providing that feedback, which really took, 10 minutes of my time to get an answer to. And that's where I think we could be really helpful earlier, is providing very helpful guidance and feedback to steer things in the right direction, and then put the time and effort into contracting in the future.
Can I get specific? When people think to email you, are you looking for a full pitch deck, or
No.
You just want the
sometimes
quick-
I just need general field or what you're working in. And we could even say, this is out of scope for Merck. This isn't of interest to us, and give them advice for where to go. Is it a medical device? Are you doing something? Are you trying to reformulate a generic? We're not the right people for that. If you're looking for a new type of formulation technology to enable subcutaneous administration of biologics. Great, we're interested in that. And we'll tell you exactly the parameters that we need to see before we would get interested. Lipid nanoparticles. Now everyone's familiar with lipid nanoparticles. That's an area we're very familiar with. And I can give you exact criteria that you need to generate, data sets that you need to generate before we would really start contemplating strategic transactions. And we would steer you in the right direction. Very informative.
Do you have a shopping list or a punch list that
So that's a
great
good question.
'cause it's different
And so,
from
no, we don't.
Merck.
So everyone would like to say, okay, do you have an areas of interest that you could send us? And I would say no, because Merck is driven by compelling science, period. So if you have compelling science, we're interested and we will explore that further. Now you can call us, we may tell you we're not interested right now, but generate these key data sets that would get us interested in the future, but we're interested in science. That's it. And if we do provide a data set, PowerPoint files and PDFs always stick around. And inevitably someone may look at that file in the future and say, oh, Merck's not interested in that, and not call us. And that's the last thing that we want.
And that's different from other pharmaceutical companies. You can go onto others' websites and they will give you specific areas of interest and lay it out in very specific terms. You guys are a little bit different.
We are driven by patience and science, and that's it.
That's great. Other questions from the audience? Yeah, there was.
So, with diversity, equity, and inclusion, how is that impacting what types of projects you guys are taking in, or is it or is it not? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so we have, with diversity and inclusion, we have looked at the historically Black colleges and universities. We have explored that further. We definitely are trying to explore that talent pool as well, and to explore the tech transfer offices. So that has grown over the past few years. But overall, we're just interested in science. And if there's any ways that we can help bring in exciting science and support that and support their students, we're happy to do that.
Speaking with diversity, then I'd like to talk, Lindsey, and how do you guys deal with diversity in your clinical trial strategies?
Yeah, that's built into every site selection that we do. So we can't find sites that are just specifically in San Diego. Like that, there's plenty of universities in that area, but we can't find a diverse population. So that's why when you get to the FDA submission or the 510K or the PMA, whatever it is that you're doing, you have to select enough sites with a broad enough demographic. So all over the country, if not the world. So the last study that I ran was 50 sites all over the United States, UK, and all the way into like Southeast Asia, just so we can get that really, really broad population, because you have to test everything on every single type of person, and everyone's built a little bit differently. So that is a very formulated approach to designing a clinical trial, is building all of that, your diversity population in there. Also, the FDA will probably not approve you if you have and this is medical device, won't approve you if you don't have a very diverse population. So you have to prove diversity.
Sticking with that, I'd love to get your thoughts on diversity and how it's impacted.
Yeah, so I'll switch my Cyclica hat off, AAIH hat on. So AAIH was launched at the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference, January 2019, 13 founding companies. Now we're about 55. In 2022, March, I was appointed as chair, and one of the big initiatives that brought to the table was on DEI, and importantly on clinical trial diversity, a topic that almost every big pharma company right now that we talk to, both on the Cyclica side, but then also mainly on the AAIH side, is saying, how are you guys solving this? So within the AAIH, which James is a board member of, and was the reason that I ended up taking the chair position, because he asked nicely. As everybody knows probably in this room, when James asks and laughs like that, you generally are compelled to say yes. And the conversations that we're having a lot within our data working group is specifically on how AI, it can help with data diversity, but then how AI with unbalanced biased data will lead to negative outcomes. So one example is a company that has built a speech recognition technology as a biomarker for neurodegenerative disease, specifically Alzheimer's. And back in 2018, 2019, at the tail end of IBM Watson Health there was some research that came out that showed that these technologies were biased to people who could speak English in a fluent way, as we're all speaking up here. And so it was very tailored towards the Western world, the developed world. Well, it didn't take into account accents. So then they tested on the Brazilian population, not speaking Portuguese, but speaking English. They tested on the Chinese population, not speaking Mandarin or Cantonese, but speaking English, and it just failed. And so you're then looking at this technology was built and trained on data that is discarding 80 to 85% of the global population. That was pretty sad to see, right? There's so many examples of this. AI is a diagnostic tool for breast cancer or myeloma, and it's just not picking up on specific type of skin or specific type, that stuff is sad to see as somebody of a representative of the diverse community. So within the AIH now, you look at our leadership, Anjali Muller, the global head of informatics at Roche, is the vice chair. Maria Luisa Pineda from Invisagenics is secretary. Meredith Brown Tuttle from Recursion is the treasurer. We have a very diverse ethnically, gender, and we're really pushing the topic of data bias in AI and healthcare. And Cyclica, this is not a shameless plug. I encourage everybody to check out our Molecule to Medicine webinar series. We don't talk about Cyclica. It's not a branding thing. It's our way of engaging with the community to talk about these important topics. In July of 2022, and then again in October of 2022, we invited a few folks from the community. In July, we had Shweta Maniar, global head of life sciences for Google Cloud, Rory Kelleher, global head of life sciences business development at NVIDIA, Thomas Closell, federated learning at Elkin, Anjali Muller, and myself, and we talked about data bias in AI and healthcare. And then most recently, we brought in a few other folks to talk about the implications and talk about specific examples and what people are doing about it. So if you're interested in this topic, there are two really interesting, I think, webinar series as part of our Molecule to Medicine series, but that's the way the AIH is thinking about it.
Great. Other questions from the audience? These are gonna make me ask a question. Okay, all right. Who's your nemesis? No, I'm just kidding. My favorite questions to ask at dinner parties. No, the next question I had is more related to the regulatory side and how, from an academic perspective, we often don't think, and when we're in the lab, we don't often think about what I do at the lab is going to affect a clinical strategy. What does that target product profile look like? I'm making this device, this thing. How do I make it more effective and efficient when it gets into your hands? So could you comment a little bit about that, Lindsey?
Yeah, so from a regulatory strategy perspective, it's very important to document everything that you're doing constantly. Trying to get things approved through whatever authoritative body that you're using is significantly easier if all those early experiments, you have good reasons, you have good documentation, any kind of good documentation process or quality process to use while you're submitting either to get something into my hands or to get preclinical trials approved with animals, labs, anything like that. It's very, very, very useful to have that really early stage documentation from a regulatory perspective. And then that also helps us to understand where we want to get that kind of approval or who we're going to submit it to first or where we're going to run those clinical trials. So really good documentation process when you're in the early stages is really important from a clinical perspective. So I can prove that we had some thought behind this.
The other question I had is a little bit on, for all of you, is we talk about big deals and we think about these big licensing agreements, and that's how we think about, how we move things from the bench to bedside. But what are some more bite-sized ways that we can interact with each of you guys? And by we, I mean scientists, universities, tech transfer offices. What are some more smaller, more achievable things that we could do?
Sure. So I can say, like I said before, one of the easiest ways to interact with us is just picking up the phone. I like phone calls as well. I think that came up. You can call me anytime and just ask a question and say, hey, we're working on this project. What is your feeling? What are your thoughts on this? Or what type of data set do you want to see? And when Merck announces some multi-billion-dollar big acquisition or licensing deal, I think there's the perception on the outside world that, oh, we opened a door, found this company and did a deal. And that's not the case. Oftentimes it's years of meeting with them at JP Morgan, meeting with them at Bio, and providing advice along the way. So I think where you can really interact with us starts with, if you're an academic, working through your tech transfer office and making a good solid connection with a business development lead at a company like Merck or really any size company, and supporting projects which could potentially just be a simple evaluation project or a material transfer agreement. Let's say if you're developing a novel adjuvant, just get that in our hands, do a material transfer. We could generate really useful data for you that you could use to help promote your business and support your science moving forward.
And raise money.
And raise money.
That's another really good point. So I live in the Bay Area, so I work with a lot of VCs, which every medtech VC in the Bay Area has people like me, their phone numbers. So always reach out to, if you are going the venture capitalist firm instead of the academic way, then they have resources for you. So I work with a lot of them. I know a lot of my partners work with a lot of them. So yeah, just making sure you're asking questions early. If you have an idea or you don't know quite how to do it from a regulatory perspective, or when's a good time to start this clinical trial, or when should we go about thinking of making these strategic partners, your venture capitalist firm will also know who to contact and who to put you in touch with, and they can help you build that strategy.
I have two comments to that one. One, just building off, and I'm going to say this because I'm in America as a Canadian. You can't hit a grand slam with no people on base. So load the bases.
Sports
right?
ball. Yes.
Work on some projects, build the confidence, be patient with it, get to know them as people. And you're also evaluating them, right? And so I think importantly, to go for the big ones, you also need to ensure that that's going to take time, that's going to take resources. You're going to allocate a lot of your team's effort in that diligence exercise. Is that something you truly want to do with that one partner? Because you can't do that for that big of a deal across multiple easily. So making sure that you're evaluating them and that you don't feel like you're lucky to be doing business with them. And I think that took about 5-6 years for us. Like, it's not that they're lucky to be doing business with us, but we certainly felt in the very early days, like, oh my God, like Merck's calling us, like we got to really, and now it's like good science. Let's just get to know one another. Let's talk about good science. Let's talk about the future. So I'd say that's number one. Number two is now on the Cyclica side, we are unlocking the protein universe to discover the medicines of tomorrow. So for us, if you have an interesting protein target, maybe it's poor structurally characterized, maybe there's no known binding pockets, there's no co-crystal structure, there's no chemical equity around it, but you're interested in it because some genetic genomic validation that has come out. We love those types of targets. Let's work. Let's do business. Let's advance this. Let's create a tool compound. Let's go probe that molecule a little bit more to validate that biology. So opportunities to us, there's 18,600 protein targets, give or take, depending on how you want to define it. 93% of them are undrugged. Well, let's go drug the undrugged. And to do that, we need to be able to work together. And so small wins will then create what we believe will be the largest portfolio of drug discovery assets. And then we all win. And then we can go to Merck and say, here's your next $1 billion program.
Okay,
You should never feel, if you're sitting across the table from a partner and they're making you feel like you need to be honored to work, that's a problem. It should all be about the science, and we're really equals going into it. About half of Merck's pipeline comes from the outside world. We're honored that people want to talk to us about their science.
Last question, Mike.
Hi, I'm Micah from the Critical Path Institute. Just a concept question. The PI who brings the technology to us through the test process, what's the role of them in certain types of collaborations? I'd be interested to kind of hear your thoughts. There's a whole spectrum there, I'm sure, with pure collaboration to see you later, bye, we're doing it our own way. What was kind of your take on that?
We partner very closely side by side. Our drug discovery team is with them. They're part of the story. We tap into their biological expertise. They have the assays, they have the capabilities. They can help point in the direction if some readouts don't make sense. From the chemistry side, we believe we're very strong on that end. And so it works together.
Yeah, the same with Merck. If we're partnering with an academic, they are part of the story.
can I add something quickly, Naheed, to your point? The third point, I'm happy to share my phone number as well. So just so you know.
All right, last question. How are you guys graded? What are your metrics? Because that's what drive people are their metrics. So what are your metrics?
So I think sometimes people are under the impression that the business development leads, they get some type of commission off of deals. If that was the case, it would be like a battle royale for the big time oncology deals.
That make
that
you
is
pay
not
for
the
more
case.
dinners too.
So we at Merck, we are judged on bringing forward exciting science that will fill gaps that we have in both our pipeline as well as our labs, technology gaps, any type of gap that we have that can be filled by a technology. That is how we are judged.
Yeah. For the clinical research, it's obviously, did you get approval from the FDA? Do you get CE mark? So those are generally the metrics that I am personally held to, is setting up a clinical trial, how efficiently can you do it? And then also bringing that to market. Like, did you bring it to market? Yes, no. And how good was the paper and the data that we put together? Great.
So standardized decision-making and failing fast, not having conviction to a specific protein target and putting all the resources into it because you really want it to work, but instead having a model that you have conviction towards and allowing yourself to say, no, not that one, move on to the next one. I'd say on the other end, for me personally, conviction is I don't care about the money. I'm not in this as a startup who's invested my entire life into the company to make a buck. I want to help society. And so what am I good at? I'm motivated only by good science for people. And it doesn't have to have, to the investors here that I'm talking to, people first, profits then. Rene Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. People, therefore profits, is the way we believe.
And there's a famous quote by George Merck that said something to the effect of focus on the patients. And as long as we do that, then all the profits and everything else will follow. So it's always focusing on the patients first and the science. And we are judged from business development, bringing forward compelling science. And if we don't move forward with it, or if we kill it fast, if we're in a diligence and there is a big red flag, kill it fast, but bring forward good science.
And on good science. Thank you guys for your time. We appreciate it. And find these folks, get their phone numbers apparently, so you can text them with your interesting ideas and good science. Thank you all.
Thank you all.